In the quiet town of Crescent Lake, nestled deep within the forests of the Pacific Northwest, there lies a legend that has been whispered among the locals for generations. It's the tale of the Mirror Man, a spectral figure said to appear in reflections, luring unsuspecting victims into his realm. As a child, I often heard these stories but dismissed them as mere folklore. However, an encounter during my college years made me reconsider. One summer, my friends and I decided to rent a cabin by Crescent Lake to escape the pressures of university life. The cabin was rustic, with creaky wooden floors and a large, ornate mirror hanging in the living room, a relic from the previous owners. On our first night, as we gathered around the fireplace, the conversation naturally drifted toward local legends. Jake, always the skeptic, scoffed at the idea of the Mirror Man. To prove his point, he stood before the mirror and mockingly chanted, Mirror Man, show your face if you can." We laughed it off, but an uneasy feeling settled over me. That night, I was jolted awake by a faint whispering sound. I glanced around the room, and my eyes were drawn to the mirror. In its reflection, I saw not just my sleeping friends but an additional figure standing among us, a tall, shadowy silhouette with gleaming eyes. Paralyzed with fear, I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping it was a trick of the light. When I mustered the courage to look again, the figure was gone. I convinced myself it was a nightmare and tried to sleep. The following days were uneventful until Jake began acting strangely. He became withdrawn, often staring blankly into the mirror for hours. One evening, I found him muttering to his reflection, his eyes vacant. Concerned, I reached out to him, but he snapped back to reality, claiming he was fine. That night, I dreamt of the Mirror Man. He stood at the edge of the lake, beckoning me with a crooked finger, whispering my name. The next morning, Jake was missing. We searched the cabin and the surrounding woods but found no trace of him. Desperate, I contacted the local authorities, but they were unable to locate him. Haunted by guilt and fear, I delved into the town's history, seeking any information about the Mirror Man. I discovered that in the late 1800s, a man named Elias Blackwood was accused of practicing dark rituals involving mirrors. The townspeople, fearing his power, drowned him in Crescent Lake. Since then, numerous disappearances had been attributed to his vengeful spirit. Determined to save Jake, I returned to the cabin alone. As night fell, I stood before the mirror and called out to the Mirror Man, pleading for my friend's return. The mirror's surface rippled, and Elias's face emerged, his eyes burning with malice. He spoke in a voice that resonated within my mind. "Your friend is mine now, as you shall be." Suddenly, a cold hand grasped my shoulder, and I was pulled into the mirror's depths. I found myself in a distorted version of the cabin, shadows dancing on the walls, and an oppressive darkness pressing in. Jake stood before me, his eyes hollow. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered. Realizing that confronting Elias was the only way to escape, I challenged him, demanding he release us. A sinister smile spread across his face as he advanced toward me. In a desperate bid, I grabbed a shard of broken mirror from the floor and thrust it toward him. The shard glowed, and Elias let out a piercing scream as he shattered into fragments. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the cabin floor, the morning sun streaming through the windows. Jake was beside me, unconscious but alive. We left Crescent Lake that day, vowing never to speak of the events we endured. Years have passed, but I still avoid mirrors, fearing that one day, Elias Blackwood will return to claim what he believes is rightfully his.